been a wonderful afternoon, but if I can get the panels to take their seats. This is the first department today that we've only had one candidate, but if we can have quiet in the house. Thank you. Okay. Andre, you all set? Okay. Well, we have Judge Robert Baer from Department 32, like I've been asking everybody. This will be a little bit different because you're the only one from your department. But we'll give you the customary, the minute and a half opening to introduce yourself, and then our panelists will proceed with their questions, and we'll go from there.
Well, thank you, Assemblyman, and good afternoon to everyone. Good afternoon, panel members. I'd like to start by saying thank you very much. Thank you very much for what you did for me when I ran for office, the only time I ever did in my life. And that is that you all endorsed me. This is the official endorsement letter that you all provided to me. And I'll just read a short passage from it. It states in relevant part, Rob Baer has served our community in its moment of crisis, and he has continued to give back to the country and county he truly loves. That's a very appropriate sentence in the endorsement you all were kind enough to give me last time, because this endorsement sincerely meant so much to me, and here's why. This is why. This is my honorable discharge after serving over 4 years in the United States Army as a captain in the U.S. Army JAG Corps as a lawyer, a trial lawyer every day. I joined the Army because my father spent 27 years in the Army. My father, who's buried in Arlington National Cemetery, he never got a chance to see me get elected judge, but I knew he would be very proud of me. I brought with me my DD-214. You all who serve know what a DD-214 is. Talks about the time I served and the awards, including the Meritorious Service Medal that I was fortunate enough to receive. I've made copies of those items, my honorable discharge, my DD-214, as well as my officer evaluation reports. And Assemblyman, if I can give them to you as the moderator, or perhaps the committee, these copies are available for your inspection when you consider this endorsement again.
Okay, and I also need to cut you off politely at the minute and a half threshold so we can get the panelists in on their questions. But the documents... Sorry, what, Karen?
She wants first question.
Karen wants the first question. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Baer, for joining us here this afternoon and allowing us to scrutinize you so publicly. My question to you is on the subject of same-sex marriages, and it's been a while since I actually looked at the law in Nevada, but does the Constitution still stand that marriage is defined as between a man and a woman currently?
That's my understanding of it in Nevada.
So, at the risk of asking you your personal opinion, please explain to me the laws in Nevada addressing same-sex marriages, what the difference is between a marriage and a civil union, how those laws apply, and if you could, give us your personal opinion on the role judiciary or government has in defining marriage and who can get married and who can't. And that kind of leads me into the whole religious aspect of marriage. So just kind of speak on that, if you could, please.
Sure, I'll be happy to. As a caveat to this, please be aware that I'm not a family court judge and I don't handle any family court matters. And as a practitioner for over 25 years, I never had occasion to do a family court case. However, I do not believe in judicial activism. I respect the other branches of the government, including the legislature, and if in their wisdom they decide to make marriage between two members of the same sex legal, then I would, of course, as I do with everything else the legislature comes up with by way of laws, I find a way to enforce the law that in that branch of government's wisdom they decided to create. The thing about law, though, is if you really look at it, over time, it's a reflection of society, the mores of society, what society believes in. It does that in so many ways. I mean, all we need to do is look at the advancement in the era of civil rights over time to see that. And I think this is just another example of that. It's a reflection of the way society views the right to associate with who you like to associate with and have the type of life you'd like to have.
Thank you.
Thank you. Lynn, please proceed.
Judge Bear, here's another one. So my understanding that medical marijuana is now legal in Nevada. If a case is brought before you interpreting the law, obviously in an impartial and competent manner, would you uphold the law, or are you opposed to the use of medical marijuana here in the state?
Again, if I had a personal opposition to a law that in the legislature's wisdom it decided to enact, my view is it would not be appropriate for me to impose my personal thoughts as to what the law ought to be. I just have to enforce what the law is. And so that would be pretty simple for me. As in a number of cases, actually it's the majority of cases, it's not as though judges go into court just happening to know what the law is. There's always an effort at preparing, looking at case law, looking at statutes, and that's really why lawyers spend so much time creating all that paperwork filed in court to try to educate the judge as to what they think, respectively, the law is. And there's a lot of behind the scenes effort put forth by judges to read all that and try to figure out what the law really is, whether it's statutory law or the Nevada Supreme Court giving us some guidance. So really similar to Karen's question, it would be an effort on my part to simply see what the law really is and enforce it as it's written.
Okay, I'm going to redirect a little bit here for his question. I think he also was asking your personal opinion on it. Is that correct?
If he wishes to answer, it would obviously enlighten everyone here. Yes, Judge Bear, what is your personal opinion, and can you give that?
You know, I don't know if I have I'm not copping out on it, but I don't know if I have a personal opinion. If I do, it's probably evolved over time. My father devoted his life not only to the military, but also to being a police officer. In fact, he was a military police officer during his time in the Army, and then after he retired, he was a chief of police in a small county I grew up in. And I distinctly remember, you know, it was an interesting time for me. Imagine having your old man be the chief of police when you're in high school. And that's what I went through, and that's what I lived for. He arrested tons of people involved with drug use. Of course, that's been a long time, and things have evolved. So I'm not sure what my personal opinion is, but if I were to look at it and see that there really is some beneficial aspect medically to those that truly need to have that sort of medical treatment, my guess is I would try to find a way to understand that and respect it.
Okay, thank you. And I will point out that Judge Bear has the unfortunate situation of being the only candidate sitting in front of you. So just keep that in mind, and I appreciate your responses to very direct questions. But that's what Veterans in Politics is all about, very direct questions. So with that, Kofu.
Okay, Judge Bear. So, Senor, you expressed that you were in the military, and your father was in the military, and then being a lawyer. What are some of the injustices you have seen some of the veterans experience, and what can you do to address them as a judge?
I've done it. I've seen a few litigants come into civil cases where it's evident to me that some aspect of military service has affected their ability to meaningfully participate in the civil case, either because they or their loved ones have been deployed. And of course, there's a body of federal law that protects civil litigants in that regard if they're the actual litigant. I've also had criminal cases where respectfully young people have come into court and it's a first-time offense for them, and they're either in the service or they're interested in becoming a service member. And I've considered that deeply because I know that a criminal conviction would adversely affect either their ability to get into the service or continue to stay in the service or get an Article 15 if they're an enlisted member in the service. And I've also had occasion to have cases in the criminal arena where post-traumatic stress disorder, drug, alcohol abuse, depressive conditions, or other conditions reasonably related to military service or deployment have come up. In those scenarios, I have decided to refer the matter to the Veterans Court judge, it's Judge Linda Bell, and have her take a look at it. However, there have been a few cases where it wasn't really squarely within the Veterans Court already, and it was in front of me, and I just decided to do the best I could to try to show understanding and sympathy, similar to what the law requires in any event under the promulgated Veterans Court statutory scheme, which is 176A.290. I could talk all about that area of law, because I think it's a good court.
I have to cut you off.
Sure.
To allow the panels to ask their questions and be consistent with all the other candidates that we've had today.
All right.
So thank you. Laura Starby.
A few years ago here in Nevada, we passed the Defense of Marriage Act. That's being challenged in court. In a very unusual move, our governor and our attorney general refused to represent the state in court on this issue. How do you feel about the actions taken by our governor and our attorney general in refusing to represent Nevada in this case?
I gotta tell you, I have no idea. I don't know anything about the case. I don't know anything about the reasons why either the Attorney General, Forrest, or the governor decided they didn't want to take it on. So if I had occasion to look at those factors, I'd be able to give you an educated opinion. I just don't know. I've never looked at it.
Okay, thank you. Jason.
Judge, thank you for being here today. Obviously, we know about your service on the bench and your distinguished military service as well. What do you do beyond the bench to help the community around us pretty much be a better community? What kind of self-service do you do within the community besides sitting on the bench?
I teach legal education. I taught 14 semesters at the community college. Actually, I helped create, meaningfully create, the paralegal studies program at community college. I haven't been able to devote full energy on a continuing basis to that since I've been elected judge, because as it turns out, there's a lot of behind the scenes time. I mean, I sit at my desk or my kitchen table at hours that you'd be pretty impressed by, frankly, to prepare for court. And a lot of times that's in the evenings, and that's the time I used to devote to the teachings at the community college. But I still, on occasion, give speeches to various organizations. I just gave a speech to a defense lawyer organization about a month ago on everything having to do with trial practice, from jury selection, opening statements, how to present witnesses, how to deal with expert witnesses, how to make a closing argument, how to craft instructions, and those sort of things. I've got an interesting event coming up at the Mob Museum, where I'm going to moderate a discussion between Oscar Goodman and our current mayor. It's not exactly just Oscar's way to stump his book. It's going to be a CLE that talks about all the lessons that he learned in all those years of legal practice. And that was actually my idea to do that. What happened real quick was that a good friend of mine, Neil Gallis, passed away, veteran, old-time lawyer. And it occurred to me that it would be good to tap the wisdom, experience, and knowledge base of some of these old-timers before, unfortunately, we don't have them anymore. So Oscar agreed to do it, and it'll sell out pretty quick, because we can only get about 125 people in that Mob Museum for that speech. But that's the kind of thing I like to do to keep active.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Angie, you're up.
Give us an example of one of the rulings that you've made while you've been judge, which you now look back on that you figured out was not the right ruling.
Well, I don't think I have one. The truth is, we have a pretty good court system by way of keeping statistics. I mean, they have statistics on everything. I don't do anything about statistics. I hardly even look at them. I don't even care about them, really, is the truth of it. But they're there, and they are kept. And it turns out, we had a judge meeting not too long ago, and part of what we were dealing with was the idea of reversals. How many times has the Supreme Court reversed you? Just hasn't happened to me yet. Now, let me tell you something. I had something special happen to me on the first day as a judge. A guy named Stu Bell. used to be our DA, was a district judge for a while, has been a friend of mine for a long time. He took it upon himself to come meet with me on my first day as a judge, January 3rd of 2011. And he said to me, Rob, there's going to come a day when you're going to get reversed by the Supreme Court. Don't feel bad about that. It's happened to me, he said. It'll happen to you. Just do the best you can in every case and don't let that bother you or affect you. Well, I guess I'll have to heed that advice when it happens. I just haven't gotten one of those back yet from the Supreme Court, but I'm sure someday I will, and I'll try to remember the sage-like advice that Stu gave me.
Okay, Stuart.
It's my opinion that people can rise very quickly in political power and in the judiciary in this country. So I'm going to ask you some constitutional questions. I would like to understand how you constitutionally think. So please do pick a U.S. Supreme Court case that you disagree with and tell me why you feel that your outlook is different from the Supreme Court's and how you would think about cases at that level.
All right. Well, that's a pretty easy one in this group. And I didn't need to have this potential endorsement interview to give you this answer. But it's U.S. versus Alvarez. If you look at that case, here's an individual, Alvarez, who gets elected to a water district board. He'd already been elected to the board. He had no reason to lie about something significant, but he decided to lie anyway. In a public setting, he said that he had been awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor and that he had been a Marine. In fact, he never served. Needless to say, he never got the Congressional Medal of Honor. He was prosecuted for that anyway, went through the court system, and the United States Supreme Court said that the statutory scheme that prosecution was based upon, the Stolen Valor Act, was unconstitutional. And our Supreme Court found that 6-3. I would be number 4. I guarantee you. If you look at that decision, the majority of the court applied what was known as a strict scrutiny standard to it, but simply put, the 3 dissenters said, we don't need to get to that. It should be illegal to go around saying that you've received these kind of military honors when you haven't. And the 3 dissenters felt that was not vague or questionable in any way, and that's the way I would feel too.
Thank you for your answer.
Thank you.
Thank you for your service.
Lily. We have a pass. Okay, Patrick.
Hi, Judge. When you yourself go to the polls, what do you look for in another judicial candidate? You can't vote for other judicial departments.
Right. I do. Yeah, I vote. I never fail to vote. I've always voted. Well, I think judicial temperament and a demeanor is vastly important. Of course, basic qualifications, knowing the law and having the qualifications to serve. I mean, to be a district judge, you have to be a lawyer 10 years in Nevada. To be on the Supreme Court, 15. But other than that, I think what it really comes down to is, look, let me tell you something. When people come to court, they want to be able to leave knowing that it was a fair experience, that justice was had. But even more than that, they want to feel comfortable the whole time they're there. They want to be scared. It shouldn't be about the judge. They want to feel like this is the way it should be. And when they leave, they need to know in their minds, whether they agree or disagree with the result, they need to know why it happened the way it did. And so I would look for judicial candidates that respect that want to make it so that when people come into court, it's a respectful experience, that when they leave that court, they feel like, you know what, that's really the way it should have been.
Okay, thank you. Robert.
Since you mentioned the Supreme Court, I'd like to just find out and ask you which Supreme Court justice do you think aligns most with your philosophy?
I hate to say that there's another question that I just don't have a knowledge base for, but that's another one I just don't. You're probably sitting here talking with the most apolitical judge, if not in the county, in the state. I'm pretty apolitical. So I don't keep track of the mindsets of the justices on the U.S. Supreme Court. I just don't. In fact, I really don't keep track of the mindsets of the judges on our Supreme Court as far as that goes. So unfortunately, I don't have an answer for you because I just don't think politically that way.
Okay, well, you know, yeah, we're at the end of round one here. However, we still have a few minutes left, and I see some of the panelists still have some questions. I'll go with Forrest, and then I'll go with Stewart.
Yes, Judge. I really didn't get to the bottom, or you didn't get to the bottom of my question because I didn't phrase it well enough. In Nevada, it is illegal for a man to marry a man, a woman to marry a woman. Our marriages are between a man and a woman. That's our law here right now. That's being challenged in court. Obviously, the governor and the attorney general disagree with that because they are not going to court to uphold our law. How do you feel about that situation? How do you feel about a man being able to marry a man and a woman being able to marry a woman?
Well, the situation itself, Forrest, would call for me to take a look at who the real interested parties are in the case. And when you look at who the real parties of interest would be, you then, and only then, I think you need to determine who their lawyer should be. If it's a matter of public interest and it's a governmental entity as a party in a case like that, it would seem to me the government would find a way to have somebody represent the interest of the public. Again, I don't know why the Attorney General, if you tell me the Attorney General's opted not to take that case on, all I can do is say, I believe you, I just haven't kept track of it.
Well, it's obviously you're not very political, so that's being truthful. You know, I love truthful answers, but the fact that the governor and the attorney general together said no way, and it's been like a front page story. It's been a biggie, but thank you for your answer.
Okay.
Okay, we have Stewart.
This is a very short question.
Microphone, please.
Referring to the question about Supreme Court justices, I wasn't thinking politically, I was thinking based on legal theory. Which one you feel that you...
Well, I have no idea what any Supreme Court justice has as far as a political mindset. I just don't know.
But I was talking about the legal theory.
Talking to the microphone.
I was talking about the overall course of time, so how they seem to be thinking and writing legally, where your methodology and thought process on a constitutional level.
Well, if you want to know whether I am an activist or not, I mean, I'm not a judicial activist. I deal with the law as the legislature brings it to me. And I don't create it or make it up. I try to find out what it is and I enforce it. Oftentimes, of course, that effort is vastly aided by the fact that the Nevada Supreme Court has taken the issue on and rendered an opinion. And that's what we use as a basis. That's what a district judge should use as a basis. If the Supreme Court definitively says this is the way it needs to be, having to do with a legal issue, doesn't matter whether I disagree with what the Supreme Court says. I need to follow what they say what the law is.
No, I'm going to have to redirect because I'm not hearing the answer to the question. I guess and please, this is your question.
Sure.
If I'm not understanding you correctly, because I'm trying to make sure we get the answer. I think where you're going with is you're wondering if Judge Baer, being a judge, and obviously the Supreme Court is the Supreme Court of the land, if there's any one particular judge or multiple judges that he either respects or disrespects for whatever reason. You're trying to, I mean, it stands to reason that if you're going to be a judge, the idol, if you will, would be the Supreme Court. And I think his question is there a particular justice that stands out, either current or past for that matter, that you respect or disrespect?
Well, you're asking the wrong person that question. I don't look at what the United States Supreme Court justices do by way of their political ideology. I just don't do it. Now, if you ask me about the Nevada Supreme Court, I can tell you I respect them all. I've done so many things with them. I mean, I've been up into the Supreme Court and argued there as much as, or as anybody. During the years I represented the state bar, I was there fairly often. But I just don't know much about the United States Supreme Court individual justices' political mindsets. I'm sorry, I just don't keep track of that. It's not something I've ever been interested in doing.
Okay, I think that's our answer on that. We have a few more minutes. There's one more question. We have time? Discussion or?
Can we take one on this side of the table? I know you guys have been beaten up on it really bad. Okay.
I'm not beating up on anybody.
I'm kidding with you.
All right, Len, how about the last question?
Okay. Well, we'll give a general one. Do you believe in the adoption of a state intermediate level appellate court here in Nevada? Is it worth it to Nevada, and is it worth it to the taxpayers' expense?
I support that. I think it's a revenue neutral proposition. In other words, I really believe, because I've heard Justice Hardesty and Justice Pickering talk about it and give presentations on it, and I know that there are people of their word when they say it's revenue neutral, so it won't cost the taxpayers additional money. But more than anything else, let me tell you something that's nice about this system, the Intermediate Appellate Court. To me, if you're a litigant in a court, you'd like to have the final result within a reasonable time so you can sleep well at night. And I think that's going to be what the real practical upshot of the Intermediate Appellate Court will be. Instead of being a 4 or 5 year process to have ultimate finality, I think it'll be a couple years at most, and I think that's a wonderful thing. I also happen to know that the justices in our Supreme Court have the highest caseload per justice than any court in the United States. And so there's that too. So I support it, and I think it's a good thing.
Okay. If we're real quick, I can squeeze in another question. Some of you,
Just a quick follow-up to that.
can I get Robert in, because I think you've asked, I'm just trying to balance this out. Thank you.
So real quick, if there's a law or an action by the government that was so extreme that beyond your sense of justice, for example, when our government interned Japanese illegally, and it was still ruled constitutional, as a judge, would you be able to enforce a law like that even though it was clearly beyond the scope of the Constitution?
Karamatsu, is that the name of the case? If I remember right from con law class a long time ago. Yeah. I mean, it sounds crazy that we would ever even think about doing something like that now. But this is what I was talking about earlier. The law has an interesting way of reflecting the values, mores, and needs of society. At that time, obviously the United States Supreme Court felt as though that was the right thing to do, given probably what happened at Pearl Harbor, frankly. All I can tell you is, as a judge, if you sat in my courtroom every day for the last 3 years, you'd leave and say, you know what? The right results, the fair results are happening. And even if you didn't think that, I would think that you'd say, the judge explained why he did what he did in great detail, so that whether you agreed or you didn't agree, you could understand what happened in that court. And if you didn't agree, it would give you a reasonable basis to appeal, because you know exactly why I did what I did. I mean, I'm known for coming out and giving a half hour, 45 minute, an hour decision in a case where I cover all the facts, all the law, so that you leave knowing why things happen the way they did, whether you agree or not.
Okay, I think we'll probably leave it on that point. It's now 3:45. Thank you for coming in.